Paula, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited, everyone, because some of you that know me and my brand will know that a lot of my branding is based around the shape of hexagons. And as a result of this, I called my Facebook group where all my business clients hang out the Hive. So you can imagine we have an awful lot of bees and bee emojis and talking about being a queen bee. In fact, people are always sending me bee jewelry. I have bee pictures, but nothing like our lovely guest today, because everybody, I literally have the bee lady. Now, you might wonder what that means. This lady and I share the same business coach, and our business coach calls her the crazy bee lady. At least
This
I
is
only
my
called you.
landlord.
Yeah, at least I only called you the bee lady, Paula. I'm so excited for you to join us. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a real honor to be invited. So thank you.
Oh, well, do you know, we don't really know where this conversation is going to go today. I just got so excited to get you on the podcast because, apart from it being my branding, which I know is really not that important in the world in terms of saving the bee, I am also passionate about bees. And in fact, one of my dreams with my husband is to move to France and have enough land so that we can have hives. So it's a long way off for us, but it is a passion. And what I'm particularly interested in talking to you about today, which is why I think it's going to be a really interesting interview for the listeners and for those on YouTube watching, is actually how nature, and in particular bees, has a correlation in terms of business. And so that's kind of where I thought I would start first before we hear a bit about you and your story. So, what is the correlation? I know we had a very brief discussion, didn't we?
Well, yeah, it is really fascinating about how the hive works. So in a colony of honeybees, so there's about 22,000 different species of bees in the world, and there's 11 of them are honeybees. But I'm going to talk about the Western honeybee, Apis mellifera, that you'll find in Europe and North America. And they are dotted about the world, but I'll talk about that as a specific species. You'll have a colony of 50,000 bees. Now, there'll be one queen, the rest, about 49,000 odd, will be female worker bees. And then there'll be, depends throughout the year, but you might only have a few hundred up to 1,000 male bees, which are called the drones. So you have this community, but they're all a super organism. And this I find interesting because it makes it the one being. It's a one being. So one individual bee is not a whole being. And that is very true about business because, you and I, we lead our business, we have teams, but from the customer's point of view, your business is that whole being that's made up of all the people that work with you and for you and help deliver the services you provide. So it's really important that you have that communication between your being so that you can work effectively. And there are so many references to bees and how bees work in the hive, but there's also a lot of misunderstandings. The main one being that it's a feminine monarchy, that you have the queen and she rules the hive. But in actual fact, a honeybee colony is a true democracy. So, for example, the queen does not lay a princess egg. So she does not lay special eggs that then become queens. What happens is for all the sexes of the bees, it's determined by the majority of the hive, the worker bees, and how they make their hexagons. So your beautiful hexagon shapes, they replicate the wax cells that bees make in a hive, and the different size of the cell determines the sex of the egg. And this is so amazing because the way they do that is they're always regulating the balance within the hive. So at certain times of year, they want more male bees. At certain times of the year, they don't want any male bees. And the queen, she goes off on a mating flight, to begin her life as the queen in the hive. And she will mate with between 15 and 48 male bees in one go, or one after the other. And she will store all the sperm in her spermatheca. And when she comes to lay the eggs, she will lay between 1,500 and 2,000 eggs a day. But when she puts her abdomen into the cells, if it's a smaller cell, her abdomen is compressed, which squeezes the spermatheca, releases sperm, fertilizes the egg, and it then becomes a female bee. If it's a bigger cell, it's not squeezed, the egg isn't fertilized, and it becomes a male bee. So we can really learn that the whole colony is a democracy. They're working on always maintaining the balance that is the good for the whole, and not even just that whole colony, but for the species, for the environment. So bees are completely selfless beings, and every decision they make is for the good of the whole. So it's just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing how they work. And I think we can take so much of that with our businesses. It isn't somebody at the top ruling, but it is that understanding what is the good. And as humans evolve and we're thinking more about sustainably running our businesses, I think this is even more relevant.
Wow. That's literally just blown me away. All that information I've learned in the last 5 minutes. And I really love the analogy that, bees are selfless beings as such, because of course, in a business, when you're running a business, if you have that person at the top, the queen bee, so to speak, that's full of ego and self-importance, and it's all about them, then that doesn't filter down so that the team work well and efficiently and with passion, and that doesn't then filter down into other students, because obviously we're talking about the dance industry here on this podcast. And so you can see how, if that balance isn't right at the top, how the whole of the rest of the organization isn't going to work. And that sounds very much like what you're saying with the hive.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is, which we can really take on board, and particularly as women, is when we start a business, we're thinking we have to nurture everyone, look after everyone. But the queen's role in the hive is she's the one continuation. So she will live 2 to 7 years, whereas the worker bees will live between 6 weeks, and then the winter worker bees will live 6 months. So you've got this constant turnaround, which many of us in businesses, you'll have people that come and work for you for a few weeks, then for a few months, maybe a few years, but you've got you as the core of your business. That's that continual thread. But because the queen's role is to lay eggs, she'll be laying 1,500 to 2,000 a day. So, that's quite a lot of work for anybody to be doing. She's surrounded like a halo of worker bees who are cleaning her, they're feeding her, they're making sure that her every need is taken care of so that she's able to fulfill her purpose, which is laying eggs.
Oh my
isn't
gosh.
that wonderful?
Yeah, amazing. Because I'm always teaching my clients about how their role as the business leader is not to sweep the studio floor and answer the emails and welcome the parents and teach the classes. Like, their role is the big stuff, like the visionary stuff, the strategy stuff, the decision making, where the school's going to go and how it's going to grow. And that basically is what you're saying. Like, and we all have to do those things initially. Like, we have to wear all the hats, just talking about purely business now. But when the school gets to a certain stage, you have to then start letting it go. And you know this as a businesswoman yourself. You have people that work for you. You can't do all the things. As much as we'd like to keep in complete control, the control freaks that most entrepreneurs and business owners are, you have to have a time where you have to let others look after you as well as look after everyone else. I think a lot of people see business as, oh, I bring in employees and I get teachers and I get admin staff and I get accountants. I get all these people in so that they can do jobs for me so I don't have to do them. And that, of course, is true. But they're also there to nurture you so that you can work on the bigger stuff, to free up your time, to give you the mind space so that you can work on the big creative strategies. And I guess that's what you're saying, isn't it? Like, the drone bees are there to nurture her so she can perform to her optimum.
Yeah. And actually, people often think that the worker bees must be the men, but no, they're the females. And the drone bees, the male bees, their purpose is to go off and mate. So they're actually pampered by all the worker bees as well. They're fed, they're groomed, so that each day they can fly out. If they get lucky and mate with a queen, they then fall to their death. So that's the end of their life purpose. If they don't get lucky in that way and they survive to this time of year, now we've got rain today, so the bees will be thinking, okay, how much food have we got? How much can we share? There's not likely to be queens flying, our drones are not going to be mating. Let's kick them out of the hive. We're not going to feed them. So they have quite a brutal, they can either have a very short and sweet life, or if they get to live a bit longer, then it comes to a bit of a brutal end, with the worker bees having to turn on them. So yeah, I think, and it's such a big lesson for us to be able to let somebody look after us. And it's that, the brilliant thing that our coach talks about is the £10 jobs, the £100 jobs, and the £1,000 jobs. And, for a queen in a hive, to think of her being a mortuary bee and carrying out the dead bodies would just be ridiculous. And when the colony is small and the queen's new, then there'll just be a few bees, and maybe she will help herself to the odd bit of honey, and she'll be, nurturing all these new bees. But the colony won't ever get down below 10,000 bees. So she's always got to have that core that are looking after us. So maybe as business women, we need to think, what is the core that we need to sustain our business in the lean times, which for bees is through the winter? What's the minimum that we need to be supported? And it could be not even with your business. It could be somebody just cooking for you at night, or a cleaner, or, getting the kids to do something for themselves. It is just thinking, what do I need to be able to fulfill my purpose at its best?
Absolutely. And the thing is, I think sometimes we get that wrong. Like, we see ourselves as, oh, what I really need is a teacher that can come in and take some of the classes off my hands, or I need a new teacher that can teach certain genres that I don't teach. And people see that as their business growth. But like you just said, actually, what may be the most important thing right now could be a cleaner, or somebody to babysit the kids for a few more hours. Like, it's not always the obvious, is it, in terms of being able to take care of ourselves so that we can grow and get to that next stage. But I just love the democracy side of the hive that you've talked about, because I think very often as business owners, we don't not rely on our team enough, but we don't consult with them enough. We feel like we have to make all the decisions, don't we?
Yeah, and I heard a short snippet of a podcast with the CMO of Nike, or Nike, and he was talking about vision. And I know our coach talks about planning your vision. And when you start a business, you have your vision, you have your core values. And I did the exercise with my team, and I was sort of relieved and astonished that we all had the same values. Well, it's great. I mean, I've got a small team, there's only 8 of us. So, it makes sense that I've picked people that have the same values. But the Nike CMO, he was saying the importance of this, because what we tend to do is we go away on a coaching day or a training day and we think, like, this is my values, this is what the business is all about. And you come back, dump it on everyone's desk and say, there you go, that's what we're all about. But what's more important is that your team, when you're not around and they're asked questions, that they are embodying your values, because they're their values too. And you do need, for a balanced business, just like within a hive, you're going to have different perspectives. You've got male, female, you've got different roles as well within the business. And so as a business owner, you've got to have that democracy where other people's perspectives come in, because we can be so driven on the big goal and we forget the smaller steps that take us there. And quite often your staff, they'll have other, and your team, they'll have other perspectives about your business. And I think one of the greatest exercises is to actually work around your team and ask them, what is their role? What do they see their role within your business? And what do they think your role as the business owner is? Because that's really quite interesting, that you may think, oh yeah, we provide this service, and you could have team members who think that it's something completely different. And that could be influenced by so many different levels. It could be just the aspect of the business that they see. And, you know, I don't know about running a dance school, but, you know, I have online courses, I have consultancy, and I sell honey from my shop and my workshop. So some of my team thought that selling honey was the most important thing of the business. I know that to bring the money in to pay for everyone, it's the consultancy. So we've had to sort of discuss and change the emphasis when we have people coming in about where do we funnel them? Are they going to be big honey buyers, or are they going to be consultancy clients, or are they going to want to learn more about beekeeping on our online courses? So it's having that understanding and that group vision, that democratic vision of what is the purpose of your business, and then how does the individual purpose of your team members fit with that whole, that being, you know, that being organism. So yeah.
Fabulous. That is, yeah. And I love that everybody is equally relevant and plays a huge part. Again, not just specific people or specific bees in the hive. Like it's not sustainable without everybody's role. I would love to ask Paula, because as we know, things can sometimes go wrong in business. Things can fall apart. Things cannot work. Teams don't work well together, or there's systems and processes that haven't been established, so things go wrong. Like, do things ever go wrong in a beehive?
Yeah, they do. I mean, lots of things can go wrong, and a lot of things can go wrong when humans intervene with a beehive. So that is one of the main differences with the way I manage bees, is I treat them naturopathically. So I'm working in alignment with nature. So the main difference with conventional beekeeping, it does tend to be treating the bees as inanimate objects that produce honey. And so it's all about how can we maximize honey production, and honey will be taken from the hive and then replaced with sugar. And so the bees, most honeybees are fed white sugar from August right through to April. Now, as a woman, as a mum, and through my own health journey, I know that sugar is really not going to be beneficial for my health. And so I was completely shocked when I realized there was this practice. So I started to sort of try and find out, well, why would you do this? And then why shouldn't you do it? You know, and I needed to find the facts. And I suppose it's that looking at how the natural balance works. And if you've got that strong, healthy immune system, if you've got that strong foundation, then you're able to protect yourself against things going wrong. So at the moment, honeybees, they can be faced with varroa mite. So there's chemical treatments that people put in the hives to treat for varroa mite. But what that's doing is creating infertile male bees. So then you'll find the second generation are infertile. So we're killing the bees by trying to kill an insect that lives in a hive with the bees. But if you feed them honey and you nurture them and you allow for them to evolve, they can live with varroa mite and even overcome varroa mite without affecting fertility. So sometimes, probably quite often, humans can cause a lot more damage when we think we're trying to help. So one of the big lessons for me is to stand back and see what are the laws of nature. And the laws of nature are not just within a beehive, but they're within humanity. And so that big shift of trying to sell things to get the money to thinking, how can I help someone? And that's what bees are always thinking. How can we help? What is the best thing for our environment? You know, how can we heal? And I suppose another way of looking at it as well is things do go wrong, and in hives, the bees will die. You know, if they get overrun with wasps, if they have too many chemicals used, if they haven't got enough nutrition, if there's not enough forage for them to feed on, if you haven't left enough honey and it rains for 3 weeks, the colony could die. The hive could get blown over by a storm. And it's like, how do you deal with that? So you have to accept, yeah, okay, that's gone wrong. Was it my fault? What can I learn from that to improve on that so it doesn't happen again? And what would the bees do if I wasn't there to help them? And there's a wonderful mentor of mine. She's an American beekeeper. She's a biodynamic farmer, and she started keeping bees probably about 20 years ago. And I love her because she really embraces the woo. I like a bit of woo. And she talks to her bees, as I do, but the bees talk back to her. And she's written books where she talks about the practicalities of what time of year it is and what's going on in and outside the hive. And then she has a little section which is in our own words. It's what the bees have said is happening, which she sort of had in dreams or channeled, whatever. But it's really interesting when you read what the bees, how they interpret things. And she explained how the effect of understanding the bees changed her own family life with her husband. So she doesn't have children, and her husband live together, and they share all the chores 50-50. Now, I've got children, and what a dream to share chores 50-50, but she has this marriage and they literally share everything. So one day one person will wash up and the next day someone else will. Anyway, it was really irritating her that her husband was often reluctant to wash up, and she would sort of have this like, oh, I've done it every night this week or whatever. And then one day she was working in her beehive, and she was moving frames around, and a piece of the wax comb collapsed, and it had honey in it and it had brood in it, and it all collapsed to the bottom of the hive, made a mess. And you just think, oh, the bees have worked so hard. They've tried to attach all this comb. They've made all these cells. They've collected all this nectar. That's all spilt at the bottom of the hive, and they've got to clean up the mess. And what she noticed was when this happened, she was angry at herself. And you would have thought the bees would be angry. They'd go, oh, for heaven's sake, what are you doing? You're coming in here and you've wrecked our hive. But instead, they stopped whatever they were doing and they all went to work to clean up the mess. No judgment. They didn't come out and cover in stings. There was no, difference in buzz, nothing. They just thought, oh, now we need to do that. Living very present. And she really took that and she thought, gosh, how can I change that in my way of relating to humans? So she just did a simple thing that whenever the washing up needed doing, she just did it. And then she found her husband started doing the jobs that she had probably been neglecting, like putting the rubbish out or, I hate to have these gender specific roles, but there are certain things that women don't mind doing and notice when they need doing. And there's certain things men enjoy or notice need doing. And so then she realized, gosh, there is this natural balance that actually, if you don't have these rules and regulations, but you just do what needs to be done, that those around you do what needs to be done. And that's really what the bees do. So yeah, it is just so fascinating.
So I thought I would just share with you guys today the planners that I have produced for dance school owners, because these are flying out of Amazon like hotcakes. And if you don't have yours yet, then all you have to do is pop to Amazon and type into the search Deborah Laws, and all 3 books will come up. So the ultimate dance business planner I designed for you so that you had a little bit of a Deborah on your desktop. The planners are full of business training, tips, motivational quotes, things to do at the start of the month, things to do at the end of the month, ways in which you can plan out your marketing and your retention, and they are selling all over the world. So go to Amazon, grab your #1 best-selling Ultimate Dance Business Planner and enjoy mapping out the growth for your studio. I love that. I love the kind of concept that if you just leave nature alone, and I think we all know this anyway, it will take care of itself. And that's obviously what happens in a hive. But in terms of running a business in a more, I don't know if it's even possible, can you run a business that is more following nature's rules, laws? Is this something that you've discovered, Paula?
Well, yeah, there's several ways of doing that. So if you talk about your individual team members, it's giving them ownership of their role. So yes, they might make mistakes, but it's not slamming down and going, oh, you can't do it, I need to do it myself. It's saying, okay, was the way I trained you or asked you to do it not in alignment with the way you like to work? How could we do this better? How would you like to run this? If this was entirely your project and I wasn't bossing you around, how would you do it? And so it is giving ownership. And something that I hear from quite a few business leaders, and it's becoming more, I don't know if I'm just hearing it more or if it is just happening more, is that rewarding experimentation, rewarding risk. Because if you don't let people make mistakes, then they're not going to learn. And we've got to where we are because we've made mistakes. And it's lovely to think that you can think, yeah, well, I did all those jobs all by myself, and now I've got you in and you're going to do that job because I found through all these mistakes, that's how to do it. But if you've brought them in to do that job because that's their specialism, that's their life purpose, you know, then just let them do it. Just say, well, this is what I want. This is the end result. Get there however you want. If you want to do it how I did it, this is how I did it. But if you think of a better way, then do it. And if you want to try a better way, let's try it, and then let's address what happens. So I think that natural rhythm of how people work, because everyone has different ways, then that's good. But there is always that pressure to keep the balance and not be too relaxed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, you know, mistakes can be expensive, and that could mean the difference between keeping someone on or not. So it's always a balancing act.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that a lot of, because one of the things I come across a lot is people that are so afraid of building a team and having people work for them because of I've got to relinquish control, I've got to let people do things their way. And so they hang on so tightly to controlling that. And I'm probably a little bit guilty myself of this, you know, let's just train them to the nth degree so that, you know, they literally do it as I would do it. But I actually love your philosophy, you know, let them do it, let them make mistakes. Okay, you know, keep an eye on them so they're not huge, big mistakes that's going to, you know, ruin your business overnight. But at the same time, let them evolve as people in their role, because actually where they end up is probably going to be far better and more beneficial to you than if you just, you know, train them to be little clones of yourself. And again, I guess, you know, this is what happens in nature. You know, nature's all about evolution, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And not forgetting to reward successes. You know, it's very easy we're always like, okay, we've done that event, now let's do the next one. But actually looking at the little things. And we had an open day recently, and we kept thinking, oh, how can we over deliver, you know? So we were going on, and I let my team brainstorm how we were going to run this event, and we had all these things, and it all came together. And then they decided, well, let's have a raffle. And they put together items that we could put in the raffle. And then when I looked at that, and I thought, do you know what? No, we're giving enough. We are giving enough to people coming. But what I'd like to do is have that raffle collection as actually a reward box for you. So whenever any of you do well, you can just dip in that raffle box and pick what you like. And that's really exciting for me, because I'm now looking for things and I know what my team like. So every now and again, I can add something in the box. And the hard thing for me was I wanted to reward everyone. As soon as I had this idea, I wanted to reward everyone at once in one go. So I'm pacing it. So and then we've got team WhatsApps, and it's that nice surprise of like, oh, here's a big hands up. I've just noticed what so-and-so had done with their little project, or what they've done. And one of my team, you know, she's one of the beekeepers. She helps with the safaris and honey tastings. And whilst I was away, I've got a shed outside my workshop where I store beekeeping equipment, and it is a real mess. You know, everything gets shoved in there. There's straw, there's bits of frames, and we had wasps had found a way in there. So there was a lot of wasps. Every time you open the shed door, the wasps would come out. And I wanted to have guttering on it so I could collect the rainwater, so that for me to be sustainable, my plants in my garden here are fed rainwater. And so I've had this water butt left outside for about a year because I needed the guttering, and just to try and find guttering is just a nightmare. And everyone said, oh, it's really expensive to have shed guttering. And in the end, my landlord has somebody who works for him, and he was saying, when are you going to do that? And I said, well, look, you just do it for me. So he did the guttering, he sorted it all out, and I just paid him, and it was wonderful. But what Kerry did, who works for me, was he needed to get inside the shed to screw bits in, and she not only emptied the shed, but she put it back and really tidied it. Everything was organized, and it was like, that's one of those things that as a business owner you'd think, oh, in the summer holidays, over Christmas, on a bank holiday, I'll do that job. But you never get to do it, or you end up doing it because somebody important is going to go and look in the shed, and suddenly you've got to stop everything important. You've got to stop laying your eggs, and you've actually got to go and do a cleaning job. And so it was so lovely to be able to thank her and go, my gosh, I know I'm paying you to be here, and you just did that job, but
You've just gone above and beyond. Yeah.
And that's, I think that's what's really lovely, and giving people the scope that they can do that instead of thinking, oh, I better not tidy the shed because it might not be how Paula wants it.
Yes.
Like, no, just tidy the shed.
Yeah, use your own initiative. I love the idea of that kind of treat box. I think we have lots of people that will go away and start creating their own treat boxes. I've done this a little bit back to front, Paula, because I was just so excited to start talking about bees and business. But what I should have done at the very beginning is just kind of said, how did you get into bees? Tell us a bit about, briefly what it is that you do, because, this is a lady, everybody, that's in magazines, on the TV. Like, we're very lucky to even have Paula on the podcast. So yeah, just tell us a little bit quickly about yourself.
Okay. So I started off as an artist, and I started my own business when I was 20, and I had a 20-year career as a professional artist, and I built a 6-figure business. I exhibited all around the world, sold my paintings for 5 figures, and was at the peak of my career. And at 40, I collapsed. And I spent the next 7 years bed and wheelchair bound with a genetic connective tissue disorder called Ehlers Danlos Syndrome. So it was very debilitating. I lost my first business because I couldn't work. I couldn't paint, couldn't do anything, and I had to have carers to look after me. So that was a huge shift from being a complete control freak business owner, entrepreneur who wanted to, rule the world with my paintings in all important galleries, to suddenly being completely bedbound with young children. My boys were 9 and 11, and my stepson was 8. So it was really challenging on so many levels. And then a couple of years in, my husband built me a beehive, because for mindset, I've always been interested in mindset. And 2 things kept me going. One was I was certain it wasn't going to be forever. I had this vision of myself being 98 years of age, walking along a Hebridean beach. So I knew that I had to recover from it. And I also believed that everything happens for a reason. And I'd already been through a divorce. I'd moved properties. I'd had all kinds of stressful things happen in my life. So, and all the ups and downs of employing people. I had a gallery, so I'd experienced quite a lot. And I was trying to think, why am I ill? And instead of thinking or grieving about what I could no longer do, because I'd always wanted to be an artist, always thought that was my life purpose, and I'd always be painting. And I couldn't do it. And I couldn't see how I ever could do it, because even if I could recover some health, I didn't think I could be doing this, with big paintings again, let alone organizing exhibitions. So it was like, well, what can I do? So when you have a business, or when you're enjoying life, there's always things that you want to do that you don't have time to do. And one of the things that was always in my head was I'd like to keep bees. And I knew nothing about bees, nothing about beekeeping. No one in my family had kept bees. And I think it only goes back to watching Far From the Madding Crowd with, like the 1970s film with the most beautiful actress, and I can't remember her name now, but she plays Bathsheba Everdeen, and there's a scene in the film. So she's a very independent woman, and everyone wants to marry her, and she marries all the wrong people. But there's a time where she's inherited this amazing farm, and she's running it all on herself and being all by herself. And there's a scene where she climbs up a ladder with this beautiful white linen dress on and a bee veil, and she has a woven basket, a skep, and she catches a swarm of bees from a tree while she's talking to somebody. And, it's like, well, she's just a beekeeper as well as everything else. And I just remember thinking, oh, wow, that's how an artist beekeeper would look. And so I suppose that was in my head as well, if I ever keep bees, that's what I'll wear, and that's how I'll look. And so my husband built me this hive, and then a local chap put bees in, and then he taught me beekeeping. So each week when he'd visit, I'd be sort of wheeled out, propped up, and he'd teach me beekeeping. And that's when I realized that beekeeping was not as natural as I'd imagined. And so I was very heretic in the beekeeping world to start with, because I was challenging. I was saying we shouldn't be using smoke, that's stressing the bees out, shouldn't be feeding them sugar, shouldn't be using chemicals. And nobody was really speaking out about it then, and certainly not middle-aged women. And beekeeping was very much a male-dominated hobby and industry. So, you know, there's thousands of retired gentlemen who keep 1 to 3 hives, and to have somebody who knew nothing coming in and going, well, why are you doing this, and you shouldn't be doing that, and that doesn't make sense, was very challenging. And so when I did recover through medicinal herbs and plant-based minerals, I started to see more about bees and the connection between bee and human health. So I thought, if we are sick because we're not getting the right minerals, because the minerals aren't in our soil, then it's not going to be in the nectar for the bees, so they're not going to get it from their plants. And then there's loads of scientific studies showing that bees prefer weeds to cultivated plants. And, you know, there was just so much synergy. And as people started to hear more about how I was keeping bees, I had lots of people coming to me from the conventional courses going, we don't want to do what they're doing, can you teach us? So that's how that all evolved. So I started teaching and running courses. And then I got the most amazing opportunity on my doorstep for a large landowner who was building a hotel. And they saw me at the local market and just asked me about bees. And they said, well, we're thinking about having bees, and will you come and have a look? And I went and had a look, and they told me what their plans were. It's now been open for 3 years. It's 2 really luxury hotels. There's a garden museum, a Roman villa, beautiful gardens, restaurants. And they just said, what do you think we could do with bees? And instead of doing what I thought they'd want, I thought, do you know what, if this was mine and if money was no object, this is what I do. And I just sent in this proposal and said, right, you know, you're on my doorstep. This is how I keep my bees. This is what you could do. It would create an amazing story. I'd like to have a museum, which we then got to do. So there's a bee museum there. And I sent it all in with no expectations. And I got the response, wow, will you do it? So that's how the consultancy kicked off. And so, you know, from what I learned from that, and I still work with them, and a lot of my team is still there, it's opened up opportunities for me to go to other places. Mm-hmm. And because bees were mainly busy in the summer, in the winter months, I had 2 years before we opened to the public. So I had 2 years to really become an expert, so that, you know, conventional beekeepers and the beekeeping world would understand what I've done and why I've done it. And for me, it was that stopping the imposter syndrome. So I traveled all around the world, interviewed bee scientists to back up with the science what I intuitively felt was right. So, you know, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just feel so lucky, but also I've taken up opportunities and run with them. So.
And going back to the conversation we had earlier, you've allowed yourself organically and naturally to evolve into where you are now. You've just gone with what felt right, with what resonated with you, and you've now got this amazing new purpose and fabulous business, which I'm falling in love with the more you speak. And you're going to have a podcast shortly. I know that you were recently interviewed by BBC. Oh, has that happened? Has that happened now?
Yeah, it has. I don't think it's going to go live until early next year, but it's a really good series where the person that does the program wanted to get advice from an expert. So, and I was, you know, researchers found me as the bee expert. So that was a huge honor.
And how does that feel, Paula? Because, you know, a lot of us struggle with the word expert. You just mentioned imposter syndrome a couple of minutes ago. You know, we all feel like the word expert is for other people, but it doesn't it doesn't apply to us. And you are an expert, but how did you find yourself embracing that when perhaps potentially you didn't feel that inside?
Well, I had a coach from early on. I was in a women's business network when I was like a representative for or an affiliate for the minerals that really helped my health, because they'd like me to speak to say about that. I was studying herbal medicine and I had my bees. So I had these three elements, and I had this coach and she was helping me sort of tie them all in together. So my business became creating a buzz about health, because the health was really important to me. And she kept saying, well, you're a bee expert. And I was like, oh, no, I can't say I'm a bee expert. And then there's quite a few coaches who define what an expert is, and it's the person who knows more than the average person in the average room. So most of us are experts. And I think it's finding a place of peace in yourself where you know what you're an expert in. And I saw a meme or an image on Instagram when I was just starting to get better, and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm better, I'm not in bed all the time, I'm going to have to start thinking who I am. And I still had so much pressure from around to return to being an artist. And I saw this picture that just said, her life is her art. And that really resonated with me and made me think, I can paint a picture and be an expert of my experiences and my life. So my life is my art, and my life is my story, and my story is enough. And I'm an expert with my story. And so, yeah, I mean,
That's lovely. So beautiful. I love that. I've just secretly written that down as you were speaking. That is just absolutely glorious, and actually a beautiful way to start wrapping up such a fascinating interview, which I have loved every minute of, and I'm sure everybody else is going to enjoy listening to it as well. What I'm going to ask you a few questions now, which I just love to finish any interviews with, although they just feel all a little bit menial, to be honest, after having such profound conversation with you. But they're just kind of like quick fire questions, and I'm sure you will put your own spin on them. So how do you feel about a quick throw some questions at you before we finish?
yeah, go for it.
Go for it. Okay, some of them are really silly, some of them are a bit more meaningful. So I'll throw the first couple, easy ones to start with. Favorite color?
Oh, do you know, I think it's green. It always used to be pinks, but I'm just really, everything's green.
And I thought you were going to say yellow. I thought that was a I thought that was a done deal. Okay, favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, chocolate. As much
Absolutely.
chocolate as possible. No
Yeah,
question. Chocolate.
totally. Favorite mountain view?
Well, I was lucky enough to go to the Himalayas, and my favorite view was above Tiger's Nest. I did the Bumdrak Trail, so it's about 4,800 meters. And I went to the temple there, and at the top of the temple, there was a monk and the most beautiful view of Bhutan. And he was on his mobile phone, and there was a little bell. The wind was just chiming this little bell, and there was a cat. I'm not a cat person, but it was just interesting that there was a cat there. Yeah, so that's favorite mountain view.
Wow, wow. And what if you could go back in history and have a 15-minute conversation with anybody, who would it be?
In history, so like celebrities and
Someone
people.
that's no longer here, yeah.
Okay, I think Nikolai Tesla.
Okay.
And I would want to ask him about frequency and vibration, because bees are all about frequency and vibration. And I've learned a lot, and there's a lot of information there that is yet to be revealed. And he apparently had sorted it, sussed it. And so that's who I'd like to talk to.
Amazing. And that actually has just triggered a question that I didn't ask you earlier, because obviously we can relate bees to dance, because how do bees communicate?
Oh, they dance, and they dance on the wax. And the frequency of their movements on the wax is carried throughout the hive on the wax. And I think that's something, yeah, I mean, dancing, and their dance, depending on the direction and the wiggles and the figures of eight, that will give clear instructions to the other bees of exactly where the source of pollen or nectar is.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
communicate through dance.
Don't we just love this dance, listeners? Figure of eights. You all need lots of figure of eights in your next piece of choreography. How about if you got to speak to somebody that's still alive for 15 minutes? Who would it be?
Do you know, it's Prince Charles, and I met him quite a few times, about 4 times, because when I started my art business, I was a Prince's Youth Business Trust business, and I did have some great conversations with him, and I was always really inspired by him. And he wrote a brilliant book called Harmony, and he's all about nature. And so I've always wanted to have dinner with him to really hammer it out and say, right, what are you doing really? Because I know he was somebody that before he was king had a lot more power and control and influence. So yeah, I think I'd like 15 minutes with him and say, right, now you're king, do you still have that influence? What are the seeds you've sowed that are growing? And yeah, just to check he's still on the right track.
Oh, amazing. I think that would be very cool. And lastly, last one to finish off with, favorite business book that somebody might want to go and buy that's listening to this right now.
Oh, okay. Jack Canfield, The Success Principles, or tight one is Think and Grow Rich, because they're both books that are often repeated, regurgitated, inspiring other books, but they are the handbook manuals for a successful business.
Thank you so much for those recommendations. And thank you for today. I've loved every second of it. I know my listeners will have loved it too. Really honored to have you with us. And if anybody wants to find out more information about Paula, you can check in the show notes. Thank you so much to Paula.
Thank you. It's been such an honor to meet your hive.
Are you looking to get precious time back in your life so you can make more time doing the things you love? DanceBiz is a class management and booking software from the lovely folk at Think Smart that will automate and streamline all your dance school admin. It's the perfect tool for all those tasks that just seem to take so long and will help you to work smarter, not harder. Message me today, folks, and I can give you a code so you can get 2 months free.